Welcome to the June episode of Historic Racing News. On this month's show, we go behind the scenes with Sky F1's Rachel Brooks.
I mean, the interview pen that I stand in, that is controlled by Formula One. We have a position we have to stand in, we can't move from that position. And we have 2 questions per driver at the end of each session, which I think a lot of people don't realise. So when a driver comes to me, I literally have 2 questions to them, no matter what has happened.
Also, we talk to Derek Daly about his racing life on and off the track.
Now, I didn't bring a bag of magic on race day, nor did he forget how to drive on race day. So the facts say something was odd, and I only began to realize it when I wrote my book. It was only when I put my latest book together that I realized there was something odd here.
And Paul Tarsey goes in depth with Ross Brawn.
I think I was master of none, I guess, in many ways, but I knew enough about every aspect to be able to both contribute and also recognize the people who had the skills to make it happen.
This is your front row seat to the golden age of speed. Welcome to Historic Racing News, where motorsport history lives on. Here is your host, Paul Tarsey.
Greetings. Well, it's June. The sun's shining, at least sun's shining in England, and the world of motorsport is in full swing. We'll be talking to some of the motorsport personalities who shape our sport and hearing about news and views from around the world. I'm joined by Jim Roller, who will be talking about the auction scene and, I'm sure, much more besides. Hello, Jim.
What do you mean by that?
Yes.
Am I
Nobody
sharing
ever.
Opinion? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I'm never sure of Jim's opinion. Nobody ever said ever.
Oh, Lord.
Jim, first we need to deal with something which has happened since our last show. We're saddened to hear of the very unexpected death of NASCAR star Kyle Busch, who died suddenly just a few weeks ago. It seems as if it was sepsis, but I think you've done a bit more digging on that. He died at the end of May, and his passing has rocked the world of NASCAR because obviously he was a big star, but he was a big star, wasn't he?
He was a huge star in NASCAR. He was also one of the most polarizing figures in the sport. And whether you liked him or not, his success cannot be denied. He was in NASCAR's 3 national championship series. If you took all of his victories, he had 243 victories, which was the most of anybody. He led the way. He had the most O'Reilly series, auto parts series. Now, the O'Reilly is the AAA kind of series. They have the Cup, and then the O'Reilly, which is a AAA, and they have trucks. Those are considered the 3 national championship stock car series, not modifieds and everything else. We're not talking about that. He had 63 Cup victories. He had 69 truck victories, and he was an owner of a truck. And so he gave other drivers opportunities to get started, because that's kind of the entry level area for the folks wanting to get into stock cars. And then he had a record 102 O'Reilly Series triumphs. He was a 2-time Cup Series champion. He was the 2009 O'Reilly Series champion. He always spoke his mind. He wasn't afraid to be abrasive if he wasn't happy about something. He really wore his emotions on his sleeve. He was not afraid to tell people what he thought in no uncertain terms. Tragically, he had just celebrated his 41st birthday at the beginning of May, and for a couple of weeks he'd been battling a what he thought was a sinus infection, respiratory problems. Fox's coverage of the Watkins Glen race actually aired a radio broadcast of him asking that the doctor, the traveling doctor that goes with the series, meet him at his bus after the race because he needed a shot. And then he raced at Dover, and in post-race interviews said he still wasn't feeling great. The Monday before and that was the other thing that made this so tragic, I think, was because it was right before one of NASCAR's crown jewels. You have the Daytona 500 and the World 600, or the Coca-Cola 600 as it's called now, and Darlington, the Southern 500, are kind of considered the three, or Talladega nowadays, considered the 3 or 4 crown jewels of the sport. And he was in a simulator on Monday in Charlotte before the race, and became unresponsive. He was rushed to the hospital, and within 24, 36 hours, and then he had passed away. Basically, he had pneumonia, and it turned into sepsis, and they have published, talk about transparency, they published the death certificate. So he basically, his organs, there was blood clotting because of the sepsis, and his organs shut down, and he tragically passed away. He leaves a wife and a young son who has a burgeoning racing career. He's just a little bit older than your grandson, and he's racing at levels and winning at levels that are he's punching above his weight class. So he was. It was quite an outpouring of grief for the community.
And it's ironic, isn't it, Jim, that somebody who's risking their life every weekend almost in the world of motorsport should be taken in such a fashion.
Yeah, it's and it proves that you need to. Sepsis is not something to mess around with, and unfortunately, neither is pneumonia. Respiratory problems should not just, don't tough it out, folks. Go get yourself checked out. Go see a doctor. And it's not a cold that'll just go away. I've had pneumonia, and it's you feel like you can, I can push through. It's just a bad cold. No, you need to take a break, and he didn't.
Wise words. Thank you, Jim. You may remember that last month we looked back at Monaco Historique, and before we leave the subject and pack it away in a nice Tupperware box for another 2 years, we've caught up with a view from the podium from our very own Nick Padmore, and that we'll be talking to him a little later. And Rachel Brooks is coming on the show as well, star of Sky F1's TV coverage, gives us the lowdown on the ins and outs of just how that works, which I found fascinating. In part 2 of the show, we'll hear from Ross Brawn. Now, I've wanted to be able to say that on this show for ages. We're going to hear from Ross Brawn about the years that led up to his magnificent fairy tale World Championship with his eponymous car. But Ross also talks about the titan of Formula One, as far as I'm concerned anyway, Michael Schumacher, with whom he worked at Benetton and Ferrari. But also we've caught up with Derek Daly, who is the latest Driver of the Month.
And now it's time for Driver of the Month. Our look at drivers who, for whatever reason, didn't get the breaks to fulfill their ultimate potential in their chosen discipline in our sport.
Derek Daly, you've been a successful racing driver in Formula One, in Indycars and in sports cars, but you've had an equally successful career in broadcast journalism as well. Looking back at these two careers, do you consider yourself a broadcaster who used to race, or are you a racer who now broadcasts?
I think, in fairness, I have to be a racing driver who became a broadcaster. That was the passion, that being a racing driver that brought me to the sport, And I got the opportunity to be a broadcaster because I was a racing driver. Yeah, so definitely racing driver, then broadcaster.
Okay, and let's look at your racing driver career then to start things off. And back in those early days in Ireland, you raced for a start something very different from the rest of your career.
Starting off in basically stock cars, which is demolition derby jalopies, when I was 16, and that was the only way I could start. We didn't have any racing schools. I didn't have the money to buy a Formula Ford. That was the only way I could start, and that began to teach me car control skills that I might have used all the way to Formula One.
How old were you when you started with those jalopies?
16, which doesn't sound that old today, that young today, but it was very young back in the day because, I mean, you didn't have a driver's license until you're 18 in Ireland at the time. You could be on a motorbike at 16, but 16 was pretty young to start back then.
And you went from there eventually into Formula Ford, as you say, and that was the way you got into racing. In any case, there wasn't really any karting or anything, was there?
And not for me. It wasn't an option. I didn't have the money to waste on karting. I wanted to drive racing cars. But Formula Ford, back in my day, that was the place to start. Everybody started there. Every world champion started in Formula Ford. So we knew we were going to have to start in Formula Ford in Ireland. And that was 1974 and 5. But then we knew we had to go to England. It didn't matter if we won races or championships in Ireland. You weren't legitimate until you went to England and you won. If you could win in England, then you were beginning to create a reputation for yourself.
And in those days, there was more than one championship. It was a very, very competitive scene, wasn't it?
Yeah, 1976 in England, there were 6 different Formula Ford championships. The RAC and the Townsend Thorson were the 2 biggest, and they were won by David Kennedy from Ireland. We both went to England together. And then the Formula Ford Festival was so big in the day, particularly in 1976 when we were there, because James Hunt had just won the Formula One World Championship, and Marlboro sponsored the Formula Ford Festival and called it Tribute to James. So it was a high-profile event to win, which I was lucky enough to win.
And part of your Formula Ford journey was buying a car from, should we say, a well-known motorsport wheeler dealer.
Well known. His name was called Eddie Jordan. He was a bit of a scoundrel. I met him, did a deal with him. I bought my first Formula Ford from him, a Lotus 61. I paid him £400 and a Ford Anglia.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't buy it as a historic Formula Ford now for 10 times that.
No, but back in the day, that was the way that legitimately got me onto road racing, circuit racing. And from then on, just things began to fall into place. And it's been an unbelievable ride all the way to today.
Now that rocket ship ride that you've had really sort of caught a light with Formula 2. Mm-hmm. And again, that was the way you went in those days. Did you sort of suddenly think, I could make it here?
The weird thing is, when we were young, we saw Formula One drivers as superstars on a different level. And I couldn't tell you that I told everybody, oh, I'm going to be a Formula One driver. But what I did promise myself is that I would do everything in my power to go as far as I could. And so after Formula Ford, really when I won the British Formula 3 championship, the rocket ship really began to take off because I had a string of consecutive wins at the end of the season that led me to a Formula One debut in the ICI team that Guy Edwards managed. And that went so well, that put me into Formula 2 in 1978. But in the middle, I ended up in Formula One. It was like a movie script. You couldn't sit down and write a career path for a young driver more wild than the one I actually lived through.
So obviously, or it goes without saying, I suppose, you didn't plan it that way.
None of my career choices or moves were ever planned. Even today, it was very much instinct, reflex. Now you've done it, work out how to make it successful. No, we never had a plan except survive at all costs.
Now, to get to that point before you got into Formula One, there was a man who was very important in your development as a driver, and that was Derek McMahon. And he was a huge character, wasn't he?
Big man, boisterous man, loud man. I first met him when I asked him would he consider supporting a young driver going to try and go to England, and he said he needed me like he needed a 6-inch hole in his head. That was my first conversation. I never heard from him for the next year until after I won the Formula Ford Festival. He calls me up. He invited me to the BRDC dance in the Dorchester Hotel in London. And I walk in and he says, I'll help you go to Formula 3. And from then on, it was just hang on to your hollyhocks, strap on your seatbelts, because life started going real fast then.
Now you got into Formula One and you whizzed through fairly quickly, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, and amazingly, I don't know how many drivers have led their first Formula One race, but my first F1 race was at Silverstone, the International Trophy. I passed James Hunt, who was leading around the outside, going into Beckett's, and then led the race. I mean, it was just, fairy tale stuff. And then it got difficult. I couldn't get a super license. I went back to Formula 2, began winning races, won the 5th and 6th rounds of the European Championship, and got another call from Mo Nunn from Team Ensign. Would I want to have a run in the Ensign? The British Grand Prix was coming up, so that was pretty important. That was a home race for me at Brands Hatch. And that was my Grand Prix debut, and it was stellar until the right rear wheel fell off at the top of Paddock Hill Bend, which is such a shame because I genuinely had the ability to finish P6. That would have been an outstanding debut back in that day.
Yeah, because without being unkind, the Ensign was not a front runner.
No, it was not a front runner, nor was the budget anywhere near middle runner, but it was a very predictable car to drive. It was a perfect car for a rookie to jump in and make an F1 debut.
And then, of course, Williams came knocking on your door, and you must have thought, this is it. I've made it. Here we are. Hang on to your hat.
Yeah. So drivers always want to position themselves in good machinery. And it was unusual circumstances because Carlos Reutemann was the driver pick. And he suddenly retired after the first 3 races, I think, maybe in 82. And Williams needed somebody to fill in the slot. And I became the fill-in driver. And in reality, I became a bit player, fill-in driver. I was never regarded, certainly by Patrick Head, as somebody who could win races. I didn't get on with Patrick Head like Keke did. And having come to the team so late, I didn't realize it at the time. But the focus was so much on Keke trying to win the Drivers' World Championship that it was to the detriment of me. I was not going to be given the same equipment because the focus was on Keke. I did races like, let's say, Brands Hatch. And without being arrogant, there was nobody faster than me around Brands Hatch in the day. In Formula Ford, I dominated. F3, I dominated. Formula One, I had a stellar debut. In the Tyrrell there, I finished 4th. Out-qualified Jarier, outraced him, and he was regarded back in that day as a super fast guy. So I only give you those details to say nobody was faster than me around Brands Hatch. Keke was 1.4 seconds faster. So I must have been a real wanker. And if I was 1.4 seconds faster than Keke, Frank should have fired me right there and then, unless he knew why I was 1.4 seconds faster.
I'm going to have to ask the question, Derek. He knew what the reason was, didn't he?
Oh, definitely Frank did. So that was the era of lightweight Formula One cars. It was the new turbocharged era. The manufacturers had turbocharged engines, way more horsepower, And the British teams were able to build lightweight cars and bring them up to the weight limit with extra water tanks that they said was cooling the brakes. Well, it is my belief, looking at the stats and looking at the facts and figures, you cannot argue that my car was slower in qualifying than Keke's every single time. I was 2 seconds a lap slower sometimes. I was 1.6 seconds a lap slower. And when I look at all the race laps, I was faster. Now, I didn't bring a bag of magic on race day, nor did he forget how to drive on race day. So the facts say something was odd, and I only began to realize it when I wrote my book, because I never looked back. I never questioned what happened. I moved on, moved to America, went IndyCar racing, started a new life. It was only when I put my latest book together that I realized there was something odd here, and it's pretty obvious what it was.
It took you a long time to get there, but and famously, both Patrick and Frank, I think, always took the view that the driver was just another part of the car.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And for me to convince them that I needed serious support, serious backing, I would have had to win multiple Grand Prix races. I wasn't in a position to do that when I started so far back on the grid. But it is what it is. I understand why they did it. I'm always glad now that it makes sense. But the problem was, because I was so slow in qualifying, I questioned my ability. When you question your ability, you start to go down in a spiral. And the harder you drive, the slower you go, the deeper the spiral gets. So I got into that spiral questioning, how come I can't drive anymore? What happened, the magic that I had? And so you question yourself, and then it affects your home life. I ended up getting divorced, got pushed out of Formula One, and that's why I went to America.
Yeah, and that must have been a very difficult time for you. But you went to America.
Yeah.
How easy was it to get the breaks in America?
Well, it's a completely different animal, and I knew nobody there. But I went to do the Indy 500 in 1983 just for curiosity. What's it like? Who will I meet? I never left. I still have a home in Indianapolis today. After all these years, I never left. Got to meet great people, got offers to race in a variety of teams. And towards the end of 1983, which is less than a year after Formula One, I began to get the feeling back of, I can do this. I always had it, but now I can do this. I qualified in the front row of the grid at Laguna Seca in 83, the last race of the year against Teo Fabi. I was on the front row of the grid again with Mario Andretti in Long Beach, first race of the 1984 season. But then I got hurt. Then I crashed. Got hurt.
And that must have been, I was going to say that must have been dreadful. That's an understatement of the decade. But just for our listeners, tell us what happened.
So I never got hurt in a racing car. I never broke a bone till I broke almost all of them. IndyCar racing is very high speed. Michigan International Speedway, high bank, 2-mile oval, and it just begins to rain. And of course, they throw the yellow flag as soon as it rains because the speeds are just so high. And they just reacted about 10 seconds too late. I turned into turn 3. The mist is just beginning to fall. I lose control, and the car just absolutely slams into the concrete wall. Within 5 minutes, it's raining and the race has stopped. It's cancelled. But the injuries were so critical. I mean, I went straight to intensive care. My life, as I knew it, changed right there with that impact.
So you've been through that. I mean, you've been through the horror and the drama, perhaps is a better way of putting it, of falling out of love with Formula One and Formula One falling out of love with you. And now you are seriously injured. That was going to be a very, very long road back, wasn't it?
I had 19 surgeries. I was in therapy for 3 years. But I was determined to get back to a racing driver. I never wanted the accident to be the legacy that I would leave in the sport. So I had to get back. I had to force myself to physical therapy. I had to go through the pain barrier. They say once you get injured, you have to go back through the pain barrier again. But I had to go through it to get myself back to being a professional racing driver, because I, stubborn me, wanted control of how I left the sport.
You're listening to Historic Racing News, a copyrighted presentation of Historic Racing News in association with White Squirrel Studios. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or usage without the expressed written permission of Historic Racing News is strictly prohibited.
Now back to Paul Tarsey's conversation with our driver of the month, Derek Daly.
You're very, very graphic in your new book, which I love. Incidentally, I think it's great. And one of the things about this book is that you've written it, that you didn't have a ghostwriter, you didn't have anybody to do it, and you are very, very honest about that accident. I'm amazed that you said in the book, and you just said it now, there wasn't a time when you thought, I might as well give this up because it's going to kill me.
No, I didn't allow myself to have any thoughts like that. And the book it's honest, it's raw, it's shocking at times.
Yes.
Even during the recovery, there were some shocking times I went through, particularly with drug addiction. When you get hooked on opioids, your life changes again, because you've now lost control of your life. You've given control of your life to chemicals. And I inadvertently fell into that because of the amount of pain medication I was on. And doctors back then didn't really understand. They were only wired to, if he's in pain, give him medication. Nowadays, they don't do it as liberally as they did back in that day. But I had a tough time weaning myself off drug addiction. And I openly put it all in the book, because I didn't want the book to be a record of the good days and the interest and the color and the glamour. I wanted all the bad stuff to be in there, because an autobiography is a life story. That's what makes it interesting. This isn't a racing book. This happened to have racing content, but this is a life story that has been quite fascinating, and therefore it had to be documented properly in a brutal, raw, transparent way.
People who have followed this show over the years will know that one of my pet hates is racing books, which I always categorize as, and then we went to Monza. Yeah. Yours is very far from that. It's a very different kind of book. So you've left Formula One, you've battled your way into IndyCar, you've battled your way through into a good drive with the Pravimaville car. You've done all that. You had the accident. You had the drug addiction to opioids. How on earth do you come back from all that?
And so in the middle of all this, I do an interview with ESPN, our biggest sports broadcaster in America. The interview turned into a 10-year contract. So while I'm in recovery, ESPN started to pay me to travel the world to talk about the sport. I thought, how perfect. Little did I know, because remember, broadcasting was never anything I would ever do. Never planned it, never thought I could do it, never had any training for it. But while I'm in recuperation and then come back to being a full-time racing driver, I had a second television broadcasting career that was being established. So I've been hardwired to be a risk taker. I've also been hardwired to focus forward. I would not allow myself to give up. And so when I went back to full-time racing, I only saw great days ahead. Didn't know where they were going to come from, but I saw great days ahead. When I was doing television broadcasting, I saw a future, but I didn't know how to plan it or execute it because I was in the moment at the time. But an amazing set of circumstances happened. I fell back into full-time IndyCar racing. And then in 1989, I stopped. and I fell into sports car racing. I had a deal with Jaguar with Tom Walkinshaw and Nissan in America, the two best Formula or sports car teams in the world. Suddenly I realized I've got control of how I end my career. And I've got a television broadcasting career set to go if I want to do it. So life is good. And I'm living on a lake in Indianapolis, loving every day.
Going back to those sports car days, as you say, Nissan and Jaguar, top teams, very, very professionally run, everything that went with that. How did that compare to your career up to that date?
I've always liked sports cars. There's a sort of a romance to seeing a sports car body. It's wide, it's smooth, it's colorful. So I always wanted to race sports cars at some stage. Didn't know how it was going to happen. Out of the blue, I got a call from Tom Walkinshaw. We're going to run 5 cars at Le Mans. Would you like to come and be part of it? I jumped at it. First time at Le Mans, our car finished 4th. Our team car won it. So I couldn't have been in a better team. Then I came back to America. I get an offer to drive the Nissan with Jeff Brabham. Jeff Brabham was a friend of mine from Formula 3. We lived on the same lake together. And so this was a perfect way. Suddenly I'm winning races. I win the Sebring 12-hour race, 1990, win it again in 1991. But a strange thing happened, Paul, because after I won the Sebring 12-hour race in 1990, we're on the podium, we're taking pictures, we have a trophy, got champagne, all the great stuff. We're leaving the racetrack, and my wife said to me, "Isn't that great that you won?" And I paused for a minute. I said, "Who really cares unless you tell them the story?" And then I realized winning was the beginning of the end of my career.
Wow.
Chasing the buzz to win after my accident, I got there. It wasn't the buzz I thought it was. And I knew that was the beginning of the end.
That is fascinating. That having got there, having scrambled up the mountain for all those years, that when you got to the top, it wasn't quite what you expected.
Wasn't the buzz I thought it was, and I thought, I'm on my last legs here. I was happy to be. So I raced another year with Jeff in the Nissan, won Sebring again. Told my team manager that my plan is to retire, so you need to start planning on how to replace me. And he said, "Do you realize that nobody has won the Sebring 12-hour race in their only 3 starts? You can do that. Why don't you stay on and do Daytona, just to keep you sharp, do Sebring, and then call it a day," which is what I did. I finished 2nd in that race.
Don't you hate
It was
that?
a great way to walk away, and I was already established in television. I had an amazing career then right in front of me in television broadcasting.
So before we get into that, the Sebring and Daytona and all those parts of what you were doing obviously tailed your career. Writing about that in your book, was that a catharsis? Was a catharsis to all of your trials and tribulations as well as the highs?
I don't know. And I never planned on writing an autobiography. Like, it wasn't, 5 years ago, I wasn't planning to do anything like this. But about 25 years ago, I was flying across America. I sat down beside a lady who I'd never met before. And we just having a chit chat. She's asking me, where are you? What do you do? Where'd you come from? And at that time, I was doing television broadcasting. We chatted the whole way across America, 4-hour flight. We land, I say goodbye to her. She leans over, puts her hand on my arm, and she says, "I'm a publisher, and you need to write a book." And you know how you don't have a time slot at the time, but it sits at the back of your mind as sort of, maybe someday I'll do this. And then my youngest son, Christian, is a 4-time jet ski world champion. He wanted to race in Thailand in the World Cup. So we built a high-performance ski in our garage at home. We couldn't do the wiring harness. I have a good friend of mine from Australia who's a racing engineer, and he was good at wiring harnesses. He's putting the harness together, and he's all talking about Formula One, the old days, Alan Jones and all. And the stories I tell him are fascinating. He says, you have to write this down. You've got to capture these stories, he says to me. And then COVID hit. Suddenly I had a time block. The time came around in my life that I'll act upon this lady saying you need to write a book. And I got into it. And once I start a project, I stick with it until it's finished. I mean, it became every single day, just gathering the stories and capturing the experiences. And it's been a joy doing it.
How long has it taken you?
It's been 5 years. It took me 3.5 years to write it. Once you submit the manuscript to the publisher, it's almost 1.5 years before you see the book. So 3.5 years to write it. And it sounds a long time, but boy, it flew by.
I have to say, I have enjoyed this book as much as any motor racing book I've had for some considerable time because of the honesty.
Exactly. And it's not a motor racing book. It's a book of experiences that are sometimes shocking that happens to be based around the platform of motorsports. And that's what I wanted it to be. It's not then I went to Monza time, and it's not what lap time I did. It's the experiences that I want to bring people on the journey with me. And that's why it's so honest, so raw, so shocking at times.
You quote your mother many times in the book for an expression that she used, which I think is just great.
My mother is 97 years old, still lives independently by herself in Dublin, is a stubborn Irish great-grandmother, but she always said to me, whatever's bad could always be worse. And she lives by that mantra. She got it from her mother, and I've lived by that mantra all my life. Whatever is bad could always be worse.
One last question, Derek, that I asked you at the beginning of this conversation about whether you were a racing driver who became a commentator or the other way around. Do you see yourself as being an Irishman, or are you American?
Oh, very Irish. Oh, definitely an Irishman. Yeah. I have dual citizenship. So I still have my Irish passport and an American passport, but very much Irish all the way through every fiber of my being.
Derek Daly, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Paul. A pleasure.
Do you think it's fair to talk about Derek as being somebody who I hesitate to say could have done better, but if it hadn't been for a whole load of negatives, he I think would have been a champion one side or another of the Atlantic?
Well, he certainly, yes. I think it's fair to talk about Derek as someone who had unbelievable expectations when he first started, and I think that's unfair for a lot of drivers, that people's expectations. Derek Daly was a champion. I mean, yes, he didn't have, he led his first Formula One race as we heard, but also he raced in IndyCar where he had not great success. He was mid-pack, but that wasn't down to Derek's ability. It was down to the teams he was with. He raced. He started the Indy 500 6 times. His best finish was 12th. He raced. He started in kart at the end of the 82 season after the Formula One season had ended. He had 5 top fives and 1 podium, a 3rd place at Milwaukee in 1987, and he raced from 83 to 89 in IndyCar. His biggest success, of statistically success, was in IMSA. He had 16 races. He had 4 wins and 6 podiums from 1988 to 1992. He won the 12 Hours of Sebring twice, which is not a small feat. And one time in 1990, he finished first and second.
Yeah.
So he was he went on in the mid 90s. He was a Formula One test driver. To say Derek Daly had a very successful career. He went on to be a huge success as a commentator for ESPN here in the States. He was quite popular. much like Benny Parsons. Benny Parsons once told me, Benny Parsons was a NASCAR stock car racer who won the Daytona 500 once, had a couple of race wins, would have been considered had a very medium statistical career. And he told me, Jimmy, I am so much more popular and more well known as a TV commentator than I ever was as a race car driver. and in the States, that could easily be said about Derek, because, you know, stock cars and Indycars in the 80s were getting all the coverage, and his success in the early 90s in road racing, well, to anoraks like you and me, we knew about it, but for a lot of people, you know, Sebring, what's Sebring? Well, it's one of the toughest races in the world to win, and Derek won it twice. And one here finished first and second. So, so he definitely had, in my opinion, he had an outstanding career. But he is, you know, there's our driver of the month is a thing that we will not have a problem filling in each month, because there's a pantheon of people who have had success in their career, but maybe didn't reach that ultimate goal. Now, whether that ultimate goal is winning the Indy 500 for someone who was born in America and wanted to be an IndyCar champion, or that ultimate goal might be for Derek Daly being world champion, which is something he was not able to do.
It was interesting talking to him, and you heard it there in the interview, that, I mean, he was, as so many people are, he was scratching around for drives and got drives in Formula One with the lesser known teams, with Theodore and with Ensign, and that he was trying hard to make all that work. And I suppose sometimes you do look at these things and think there is the haves and have-nots, that, you know, we have seen both sides of the pond. Very well-funded South American drivers, and, you know, that I'd include people like Ayrton Senna in that as being, you know, he didn't have to worry about money, whereas Derek told me that you know, he worked in a mine in Australia to get enough money to buy a Formula Ford, and I think that's kind of blighted. I don't want to use that as a negative word, but he was always struggling around for money and for drives. And when he got that drive with Williams, it looked like the big breakthrough. It looked like, okay, here we go. And that, you know, he said that they were at that point running those cars with water-cooled brakes, he said, in inverted commas. Water-cooled brakes, which meant that there was a huge great water tank which was full when the car went across the weighbridge before either qualifying or the race. And then within 2 laps, all that water had boiled off on the water-cooled brakes, and the weight had disappeared. And that whilst Williams kind of knew that they weren't going to get away with that properly in the race, they also kind of knew that they were going to get away with it in qualifying, and that car was sent, that Keke Rosberg's car was sent out, dare I say underweight? Yes, I dare. We went out with a lack of weight in the car, and that just for balance, they sent Derek Daly out with a properly weighted car. And he said, the trouble is you are immediately then into a spiral, which is that he knew in the same car he was as quick as Rosberg. And he said that. And he said, no, I know I was as quick as Keke in the same car on the same day. He said, but he was going out in an underweight car in qualifying. I was going out and driving every bit as hard, and I was a second and a half off the pace. And that, he said, that spiral then makes you drive harder because you think this can't be right, which means you make more mistakes. And that means that your self-esteem hits rock bottom, and the whole circle starts again. And it was interesting to hear him explain that, and to say that Patrick Head had called him in and said, "You're a second and a half slower than Keke," and that Derek had said, "Well, that, but they're not the same car that we're running."
Yeah, and but I'm 100 kilos heavier too.
And he said, "But you're a second." And he said, "If I was a second and a half slower than Keke, you'd have sacked me by now." And I thought that is such a good line. And
the other thing too, you talked about the internal spiral. Well, then there's the external. The teams that don't know that you're being sent out with a car that's a lot heavier than the other guy, they automatically assume, oh well, you can't carry Keke Rosberg's helmet bag. Well, no, that's not the case.
And I think with this whole series, and we'll see it over the course of the next months, that there are so many people. There are some drivers who didn't fulfill all the expectations because of their own shortcomings. But I think most of them actually were dealt a fairly rum hand, and I think that Derek falls into that very much so.
I would agree, and I think the other thing too, especially when it comes to Formula One, is the guys who were right on the cusp of something and then change teams, and it was the exact wrong time to change teams.
Yeah, and that, okay, you could argue that Derek got the lucky break because that car was Carlos Reutemann's at the beginning of the season, and that with Reutemann deciding he didn't want to do it anymore, they had to find somebody to slot in. And so I suppose the spiral starts with, you weren't first choice, but you'll do, and I think
you got a pulse. Yeah. Okay.
And I think he did a first class job with the equipment that he was given. Who knows what would have happened had he not had that accident at Milwaukee? That it was a horrendous accident, and
it was.
That we haven't really touched on his book, which is fascinating.
Yeah, very good book.
And I said to him that this isn't a motor racing book. This isn't a motor racing book. This is about you as a person and what it meant. And that I suppose people like you and me and fellow petrol heads, they will see the pictures, and the pictures are still about of Derek hanging out of the front half of his car with his feet hanging, and you think, oh God, that's nasty, but he survived. But actually it isn't quite like that, is it? Because it took him 2 years before he was even close to being better, and he never got better. And I think those kind of things maybe we tend to forget. That go to any British Racing Drivers Club event or anything like that, and there will be a cohort of people who can't get up the stairs quite as quickly as they should, or that can't walk over to the bus, or whatever it is. And you think, oh yes, I remember that. That was Nürburgring, or but no, I found it fascinating just sitting and talking to Derek, and we will have another of our Driver of the Month next month, and I think our listeners are going to be a bit surprised by the next one.
That's what we call in the business there, a tease.
Yeah. Now, last month we were looking at our trip to the Monaco Historique, and a good time was had by all. But one of the stars of the show is our old friend, a long-time friend of this show, and that's Nick Padmore. And Nick joins me now. It wasn't your first time at Monaco, was it, Nick?
No, it's crazy to think, really. It was my 5th time, and it's very surreal. The weekend, I've mentioned before on our chats that it comes around so quickly, and then it's over and done with so quickly. So it's an amazing weekend, and I think every other year, it gets bigger and better.
It is now very much in the shadow, perhaps, but it's like the Grand Prix now, isn't it? It was always a poor relation, but it doesn't seem to be that now.
Yeah, it is, and certainly the security treat it like a modern F1 race, because it gets harder and harder every year just to get around, really. But it's an amazing event, and it's still, one of the best kept secrets, because a lot of people don't realise it's actually going on. But it's an amazing show. It's fantastic, and I still can't believe 5 times. I've been on the podium every time. Just get that one in there, just showing off a little bit. But I never dreamt I would be going there at all, really.
What cars have you driven in the previous 5 times?
Well, let's start with the oldest. So that was Lotus 16 for 1958. I've driven, obviously, the Lotus 77, the Lotus 88, the Shadow DM5, the Shadow DN8, and the Fittipaldi as well.
That's quite a cabal of different cars. And this year, what were you in?
This year, I was in actually, I've left one out, the Lotus 92, and which unfortunately didn't run. It had, we think it was a loom that was breaking down, so it's been sitting around for 2 years. The guys at Brytech changed the engine. They did not stop working, but it wouldn't run. It wouldn't really pull past 9,000 revs. So really, it was over and done with pretty quick as soon as you go up through the gears. So the 92, I did qualifying. We had a problem then, and then the race we decided to park it, which is an awful thing to do. It really hurts. And it was interesting. Mike, who runs the car, we both looked at each other and said, "We're racers." But our brain is saying, no, it's not going to happen. So I had to get out. And then the Lotus 77 as well, which is my baby that I've driven since 2013. So
yeah, you've got a very soft spot for that car, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. It was at mine and Claire's wedding. I was in the negotiations when the car was first bought by Max Smith Hilliard. Actually, it's quite a good story. I was driving along back from Pembury, and Max phoned about the car. And I think it was Hall & Hall he was buying it from. And I was driving along, trying not to listen, but I was. And it was literally like me going into Next and buying a shirt. It was literally, I'll have that. And I remember I almost hit the central reservation when he said, yeah, we've just bought it. And I was like, oh my God, that's incredible. So that was the start of an amazing journey with with Max, but also that car as well. Now it's owned by Chrome Cars and Brytech run it. It is a part of, the family, really.
And with that car, am I right in saying that's a Gunnar Nielsen car?
Yeah, it is the Gunnar Nielsen car. So we've been using it for a long time, and I would need to see how many Grand Prix he did in it. But he did a few, didn't he, before he was ill? So yeah, it's just so special. It looks so good, and it's mega fun to drive. It's great fun.
When you're driving a car like that, how aware of its history, I'll get this right in a minute, of its history are you when you're driving a car like that? Is it just another race car, or is it something more than that?
No, it is something very, very special, but I have to detach myself. I can't look at the car, which sounds really bizarre, but if I looked at the car, certainly before quali or the race, and you think about what the car or the chassis plate has done, you would yeah, you would find. For me, I'm so passionate about this. Is my sport, my job, my life. That you have to sort of detach yourself from it, really. And obviously, you're looking after the car 110%, but you're flat out. Yeah. So it's just mega. It's when you look when you're sitting in the car and you look around it, and I've mentioned before the view from the cockpit driving around Monaco or any track, the view is really important for me. You think, what are you going on about a view? But it is when you see, you look in the wing mirrors and you see the rear tyres getting taller as you accelerate, and they expand so much. Yeah, somewhere like, I'm going off the rails now, but somewhere like Spa, top of Eau Rouge, you look in the mirror and your tyres are just getting bigger and bigger. Wow. Mainly like low pressured at the beginning of a run. But yeah, it's special, as you can tell.
Yeah, and you touched on the fact that you had that car at your wedding, yours and Claire's wedding. I'm not going to let you get away with that. Tell me about what happened.
So when I was working for Max, he was a good mate. So we organised the wedding. And he said, you've got to have some cars on display. And I was like, no, it's a bit show-offy. And he said, well, people want to see what you drive or what you coach in. So Max very kindly said, right, Truckee, load up the lorry. We're going to take the TS9, Surtees TS9, the Lotus 77, and the Formula 3 March. So it was such chaos getting the lorry down to the venue. They had to cut all the trees back to try and get the lorry down, and then Truckee just unloaded the lorry. He's an amazing person. He just did it. So I think we were having the afternoon meal, and then as we come out, the guy, the speaker said, just let you know there's something outside. So the cars were there under the tree, and it looked so cool. And then we fired a car up, and that was it. So then Truckee put them away. Job done.
That probably puts every other wedding in history to shame. It's a great one to think about. The future is pretty busy for Nick Padmore, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, thank God. And it's interesting now, historics are up to 2015. It's making me feel really old. I'm still only 21. So I'm driving an Audi R8 GT3 LMS Ultra, got to get all that in this new GT3 Revival series with Jean-Louis Rion. Very different for me, very computers, ABS, traction control. It's a new challenge. I'm enjoying it. It's very, very different. And that's on the World GT stage, which some of the rules are slightly different.
Right.
Yeah, and the fines especially. It wiped me out for the year if
really,
speeding in pit lane, stuff like that. So I'm doing that, and then I've gone back with Brytech for the Peter Auto series. So back to my German family, and Mike and Mark and their owners are just putting me in cars whenever they can. So that's really cool because you never know what you're going to drive until you're there. So that's Peter Auto, and then obviously my Mini Miglia this year, and then the Historic, hopefully at the Revival, and then Claire's racing as well, Citroen C1, don't forget that. So that would be a lot of fun.
How do you feel about watching Claire on track? Are you going through the hoops that she goes through normally?
Oh, I hate it. I'd like the first MX-5 race she did at Silverstone last October. Mark, my right-hand man from Brytech, came over and he ran the car. And I was like, my stomach. And I kept thinking, I've had too many lattes in the morning, but it wasn't. I was just so nervous. And she was really calm about it. I said, what do you think? How you go? I don't know, I'm just going to go and have some fun. So she did really, really well. But at Silverstone, so June 13, 14, I'm going to be racing the Miglia, and then Claire's going to be racing the Citroen C1 in a 3-hour race. So Mark's there again. So Mark will be overseeing everything. And then Dad and everything. So it'll be a nice weekend. Friends and family will turn up. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, and any of our listeners who are about on that weekend, get yourself down to Silverstone to wave the flag. But for now, Nick Padmore, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
There are lots of ways to keep up with historic racing news. Our podcast comes out on the first Wednesday of every month. The 2-hour show includes interviews with drivers and other personalities from years gone by, plus news of historic events like the Goodwood Revival and the Silverstone Festival. And Jim Roller keeps us up to speed on happenings stateside and looks at the activities both on and off the track in the USA.
And you can also follow us on HRN Chronicles. It's our version of a time machine. We have archive features, exclusive interviews, and behind-the-scenes stories going way back into the history of our glorious sport. Plus, we keep an eye on the latest classic and competition car auction news. It's a place where motorsport's history lives.
And don't forget our amazing Facebook page. With over 1 million views a month, it is one of the leading social media channels for the historic racing fan. We feature tales from years gone by, news from around the racing world, and we also take the opportunity to flesh out the stories we cover on our podcasts with photographs and yet more background information.
If you would like to find more editions of the Historic Racing News podcast, try searching Historic Racing News wherever you get your podcasts.
The YouTube channel is simply called HRN Chronicles.
And just search Facebook for the Historic Racing News page.
You're listening to Historic Racing News. Now back to your host, Paul Tarsey.
Before I move on, we're recording this at the end of May to go out first week in June. And I just want to send very, very best wishes to our friend Maria Costello. For anybody who doesn't know, Maria is, she's one of the bravest people on the planet. She is a Isle of Man TT rider. She's been doing it for decades, and she's had some huge success. For a long time, she was the fastest ever woman around the TT course, and then when she decided to go for a slightly safer option and ride motorcycle and sidecars around the TT course, as if that was ever going to be safer. She had a huge accident, and as we speak, she's being treated in hospital in Liverpool. She was airlifted out of the accident site, and she's in Liverpool. I had the pleasure of interviewing Maria at Goodwood last year, and Jim, you and I talked to her at Race Retro, and yes. She's a lovely lady. So Maria, get well soon, and don't stop fighting, please, because she's a star. So Maria, get on and get ready. Well, Jim, believe it or not, that's it for the first half of the show. In part 2, we'll be talking to Ross Brawn about his amazing career. And Jim, you're going to bring us news of the auction market. We'll hear from Rachel Brooks, who will take us behind the scenes at the world of Sky F1.
That's it for part 1 of the June edition of Historic Racing News. Don't forget to check out part 2 wherever you get your podcasts or on our YouTube channel, HRN Chronicles. Be sure to check out our Le Mans special episode later this month on Radio Le Mans and wherever you get your podcasts.